And today we're going to be showing you how to install the Soler Performance throttle bodies on the C8 Z06. If you've never heard of Soler Performance's throttle bodies, they are an awesome product that gives you pretty much the best bang for your buck in regards to performance. If you want more information, I did a full product review video that you can check out right here. And on top of that, our second giveaway of the channel is officially live for a Soler Performance throttle controller. If you're interested in entering the giveaway, it's super easy. Just check out in the comments a link for the video where I talk all about the throttle controller and how to enter the giveaway. But with that being said, let's get started with this how-to install. So to start this install, here are some of the main tools you'll need to do the job. And this install will be focused on the C8 Z06 hardtop convertible, but is also applicable to the coupe, which actually has less steps than the HTC since the coupe can access both the engine side and trunk side. Also, this is technically applicable to the C8 Stingray and E-Ray as well compared to the Z06 we are working on in this video, with the main difference being that there are two throttle bodies to remove instead of the one in the Stingray and or E-Ray motor. So to start this install, we will be working on the engine bay side first to get access to the OEM throttle bodies we plan to replace. For the HTC, you can only open the engine bay side or trunk side one at a time, which adds extra steps compared to the coupe version. To gain access to the engine bay, we need to go ahead and remove the T15 Torx bit screws holding the engine bay cover. The next thing we need to do is undo the reservoir brackets using a 10mm socket. This will allow you to shift the reservoir out of the way to gain access to the connectors, to unplug, and bolts that we need to remove. Also, the reservoir does not need to be removed and can be shifted out of the way. Just be careful of the lines when doing so. So now that we have access, we need to remove the airbox and rubber couplings to get to the throttle body. There are connectors that are connected to the airbox in particular that must be unplugged along with the plastic pins that hold a wire harness in place. In total, there are two mass flow air sensors, two O2 sensors, and a GPS sensor that need to be unplugged off of the airbox. The tabs also need to be removed that are shown here in order to fully remove the airbox as shown. With this, there are two T30 bolts located at the bottom of the back of the airbox that will need to be removed from the engine bay side. There's also another two bolts on the front end, but we'll remove those later when we are working from the trunk side. There are also two additional connectors that are directly connected to the throttle bodies themselves that we need to unplug, but that can also be done once the airbox is out of the way. Start though by unplugging all the connectors. All the connectors require a red tab to be pulled and pushing down on the black tab to then unplug. Some of these connectors, I will say, are pretty challenging to unplug, and I found using a special plug pliers that really helped a lot in certain cases that I'd highly recommend getting before your install. I'll have links in the description for the tools in case you're interested. In a pinch though, you can use a flathead screwdriver to act as a wedge between both sides of the connector as you push the black pin and pull the connectors apart. Next, you need to remove the two T30 bolts from the backside of the airbox. These are pretty hard to reach in general, and using an extender with a universal joint was the best way I found to get to these bolts, at least to fully loosen them, and then reach in by hand to get the bolts. If you have the HTC, you can go through the central vent to gain the access needed. If you're in the coupe, you'll have to go in at an angle to make it work. Also, when grabbing the T30 bolts, make sure to not accidentally drop them in your engine bay, because trust me, you don't want to have to dig them out. Next, use a 7mm socket to loosen the collar bolt on the rubber couplers. They don't need to be fully removed, but they only need to be loosened so that the couplers can be removed later. Next, we can unplug the plastic push pins that hold the wire harness. They are a bit challenging to remove even with a trim tool, so if you're finding it difficult, you can actually carefully cut these zip ties loose from the wire harness and remove them later. If you go this route, you can check out the description for links to the replacement zip ties that can easily be purchased. Once that's all done, we can go ahead and close up the engine bay side for now and tackle things from the trunk side. To do that, we need to reposition the reservoir tank onto the position it was before. To lower the roof back down, we need to turn the car on, but in service mode. Basically, service mode is just turning on all the electronics without actually turning on the engine. Please note that it's important that you don't turn on the car fully, because you don't have all the sensors plugged in and it's going to throw the car into limp home mode and you just don't want to deal with that. To place it into service mode, simply push the on button and hold for 10 seconds without having your foot on the brake pedal. At this point, the car will turn on all the electronics, which will allow you to put the roof down. At this point, you can now open the rear trunk and remove the items and trunk lining. Next thing we need to do is remove the rear trunk cover that's held down with T15 screws. After which you can remove the two inlet couplings that are held down with four 10mm bolts each. Once that's done, we can remove the two T30 bolts holding the front side of the airbox. There's also a small connector on the airbox that is under the airbox that needs to be unplugged. Now for the HTC, the clearance is actually much tighter than it is on the coupe and requires the airbox cover and filters to be removed. To do that, remove the 8mm bolts for the cover, and then the filters will easily pull out as well. With that, we can now fully remove the airbox. It takes some wiggling to get out, but the key I found to make it work is first wiggling the airbox backwards and dislodging it from the back end of the rubber couplings. After which you can actually push the airbox slightly forward to push the rubber coupling slightly and gain the clearance to then twist the airbox up and out of the area. With the airbox now out of the way, we can easily pull out the rubber couplings and gain access to the OEM throttle bodies. You can also go ahead and unplug the connectors to the throttle bodies that you now have access to. At this point, you're ready to remove the bolts holding the throttle bodies. The bolts are kind of deep set, and using an H6 hex key along with the socket extenders will do the trick. Also, depending, it may be a good idea to lay down a simple towel just to catch any bolts that accidentally fall. Now with the old throttle bodies removed, I actually found installing the new throttle bodies from the engine side to be easier. Just hand tightening will do for now, and then doing a final tighten from the trunk side will work. The one big thing to keep in mind is that there is a bracket helping support the wire to the driver's side throttle body connector. You'll need to thread the bolt through the bracket first before the throttle body, and it will go through the lower inner bolt for the driver's side. At this point, we can go ahead from the trunk side, tighten all the throttle body bolts, and reconnect the throttle body connectors. At this point, you can start reinstalling everything back, but in reverse order, with the couplings and temporarily tucking the wire harness out of the way so that the airbox can be reinstalled. We can now reinstall the airbox similar to how we were taking it out by sliding and rotating the piece back into place. The big thing is to slightly shift the airbox to clear the inlet heat shields and then shift up to get the rubber couplings reattached to the airbox. Once you have the lower T30 bolts holes lined up, you'll have the rest of the airbox lined up to then reinstall everything else. Reinstall the filter, front connector, inlet couplings, and covers. At this point, we can now finish the install on the engine bay side and move the reservoir out of the way to finish installing the connectors, back T30 bolts, push pin plugs needed, and the coupler collar bolts. The last important step is that the C8 needs to be power cycled to reset the ECU with the new throttle body. The process is essentially 3 minutes with the car turned on and 3 minutes with the car turned off, and doing that cycle at minimum 3 times but can require 4 times. During each time, the car idling will sound a little bit different, which is normal as the car is relearning the amount of airflow going through the system. It's also normal to experience a check engine light which will go off after the cycles have been completed and you turn the car back on after that last cycle. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below and feel free to watch any of my other videos. Thanks for watching.